If you record a macro while you format a pivot table, you can run that macro again on the same pivot table, or to make it more flexible, so it will run on a pivot table with any name or any field names, you can edit the code that you record to make it more flexible. So we'll record a very short macro and then see how to edit it. So in this pivot table, I'm going to turn on the macro recorder and call this pivot format. Now I'm going to go up to the ribbon, click the Design tab, and for Report Layout, I'll select Show in Tabular Form. And the other change I'll make is I want to always have sum of in my values fields instead of count of, which appears sometimes. So I'm going to right-click here, Value Field Settings, and go to Sum. And I'd like the number format to be consistent, so I'll select number, 2 decimals, thousand separator, and this negative number format. I'll click OK, and to click OK. Now both of these are sum, and we have changed the layout. I'll stop the recording. To see the code that was created, I'll go to the Developer tab and click Visual Basic. Go to the Modules and double-click Module 1, and there's the pivot format code. So you can see here that it's referring to a specific table by name, and that's the name that's automatically assigned when you create a pivot table. Instead of using a name, you can use an index number, so that would refer to the first pivot table on the active sheet. I could do the same thing here. So that's a simple change you can make to the code. And here we can see that the pivot field is referred to by name. Instead of doing that, we could create a variable for the pivot fields. I'm just going to delete that comment at the top and create a variable. So I type dim, and I'm calling this PF, and it will be a pivot field. Now I'm going to also delete that line that's just selecting a cell, and we don't need that. In here we're using our pivot table 1, and right now it's looking for a specific field. Instead of doing that, we're going to say for each PF in active sheet pivot tables 1, and then I'm going to put next PF. So within this little section, we're going to do something to each pivot field, and right now it's going to do something in the active pivot table dot data fields. So we want to work on each pivot field in our first pivot table on the active sheet for all the data fields. And now instead of this reference to a specific pivot field, we're going to say with PF. So it will do that for each field. I'm going to take out this line about the caption because we don't want to change it all to a specific name. I'm going to move that up into our section. So for each pivot field in the data fields, the pivot field function will change to sum if it isn't already, and the number format will change to the one we selected. And now this will run on any pivot table, the first pivot table on the active sheet. It's going to change the layout and make all the pivot fields in the data fields area be a sum with that number format.